to go that mile, you have to like crawl to get that inch, and your knees are bleeding, your hands are bleeding as you're crawling through this mile. But then after like a week or 2 weeks of crawling every day to get that inch and it taking all that time, then you're walking through that mile and you're doing it in like half the time. Having that commitment and discipline, which only really comes by being rigorous and constantly rigorous with stuff, which is actually like a tattoo that I got on my hand.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
Welcome to another episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. My name is Rebecca Lynn Matheson, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt McKeever. And we've got a very special guest on the show today, Peter, aka the Hungarian Experiment, that I'm sure many of you have seen in a lot of our YouTube videos, as well as he is the man behind all of these YouTube videos and the Canadian real estate channels. So I'm really excited to dive deep into just Peter as an entrepreneur and hear a little bit more of his backstory. So before we get too deep into that, Matt, why don't you just break down a little bit about what Problems or Profits means to you?
Absolutely. So Peter's been here kind of since day one, so he's well familiar with the Problems and Profits philosophy, but Problems or Profits really is this concept of life's a choose your own adventure. And not only do you get to choose what direction you go in, but you actually also get to choose how you interpret the different obstacles, challenges, pivots that come along that journey. And for me, it's so important that we realize we've got this sense of agency, that we can actually choose to interpret things through different lenses. And in fact, if you choose to view everything as a problem, you're probably right. It is a giant problem that you'll never be able to solve. Alternatively, you can choose to interpret it as an opportunity, and you can actually make the most of whatever that problem or obstacle is that you came across. So for me, that's what Problems and Profits is all about, and really excited to explore this with you, Peter, further. But before we do that, we'll jump into our 3 warm-up questions. So question number 1, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Well, I've broken many hearts in the past, so we'll just keep it at that.
Many hearts. Peter the Heartbreaker over here. All right, well, we'll jump right into the next question, unless you have anything else that you've ever broken before. But if you had $1 million and only 24 hours to spend it, how would you spend it before it disappears?
Yeah, I've obviously heard a lot of these podcasts, so that's ideas come to me a lot. And for myself, I couldn't really pinpoint one exact thing that I would really do with it. It's tough to say what you would actually do in that moment and knowing what you would do with $1 million in only 24 hours. But if it wasn't trying to invest it, which I think a lot of people mention on this podcast, I'd probably use it to help my family, help my loved ones right now as well too. Like the 519 pledge is going on, and it's a big thing where it's like a big sock drive here in London, Ontario, and using that to kind of give back to the community. So I'd use it to try to help people and have an impact on people in this world. So, yeah.
Awesome. And question number 3, why are you you?
Why? Because I realized a long time ago that I wasn't on the path I wanted to be in life. Maybe we'll get into it in this podcast, but I've discussed this many times in previous YouTube videos, on my own channel, and as in discussions with, I believe you, Matt, on some of your lives that we've done. But I was chasing the wrong thing in life for the longest time. I was chasing the money. I was doing what I believe my family wanted me to do, get a good job that pays a lot of money. And I realized after reading a book called Mastery by Robert Greene that myself, as well as everyone in this world, has the opportunity to do big things and really have an impact on the world and impact on others. And that's all because they were chasing their passions in life, and their passions kind of synergize together to become their life task and do something so great. And that's what I'm on right now. For the last 10 years, probably 12, 13 years now since I read that book, I've just been going all in on my passions and not listening to what friends or family or society's telling me that I should be doing, and going all in on my various passions in life. And, sometimes you discover things that you're like, I'm not that passionate about this. And then you discover things you are passionate about, or it's an aspect of something that you're passionate about. Like, for instance, fitness and weightlifting. Like, for me, I was like, am I passionate about fitness and weightlifting? And it was more that I'm passionate about like that discipline and self-improvement. So for me, it's been discovering these passions for the last 10, 12, 13 years. And now it's like going all in on them and trying to turn them into something and really focusing on that. So I think that's why I'm me. I read that book. It really influenced me. I met you, Matt, and that really influenced me. And again, just going all in on what I'm passionate about and trying to become the greatest man I can be with the values that I think that represents, and trying to give back and do better and be better and find what my life task is, what my purpose is here on the earth. I want to accomplish greatness like so many of these great minds from the past that I've read about, and continue to influence all our lives. And I want to be that. I want 100 years from now, someone to be like reading about me in a book and be like, holy shit, I had no idea that was because of this crazy Hungarian guy. So that's basically why I'm me, at least I think.
Awesome. Definitely appreciate that, Peter. Well, just to give some context here, I'd love to hear just a bit of a breakdown about what it is you've been doing for the past, we'll say 5 to 10 year range. And you mentioned going all in on your passions in that time. So I'd love to kind of have you break down a little bit of what you've been up to, what you've been building, and what passions you have gone all in on.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we're going to get all into this. So just again, to kind of reiterate, we're going to get to where I actually kind of read that book and how that affected me. So, I was like a follower in high school. Like I was part of the popular crowd, but I was always like a follower of the people who were the more popular, or my friends. And it wasn't until like college, and then I graduated college. So I went to school to be a resource drilling and blasting technician. So it was a 2-year program outside of Peterborough, Ontario, in Lindsay. And from that, I got a job working in an underground gold mine in Red Lake, Ontario, which is like the most northwesternly town, I believe, in Ontario. And I was working 7,000 feet underground. And I was up there, and again, I was chasing the money. I was doing what I believe my family wanted me to do: get a good job, get something that pays well and consistent, go to school, do all that type of stuff. And while I was up there, this was like when Joe Rogan was just kind of starting his podcast. He was only a year or two into it, and he had Robert Greene on the podcast, and he was mentioning his book called Mastery. And I was like, I have to get this book because this sounds like it's like speaking to me. So I got that book and I read it, and I was at the age of 21, I believe 20 or 21. So I believe it was 2010, 2011-ish. And I'm 31 now, just for some more context. So it was about a decade ago. And I remember reading in this book, and again, everything that I mentioned before, that like people like Einstein, Thomas Edison, Leonardo da Vinci, the Wright brothers, like all these people who had a massive influence on the world. And he basically broke down their lives and showed that like these guys, they're not geniuses. They're not more special than you or I. And the only thing that allowed them to get there is, again, they discovered what they're passionate about, or they experimented with different skills and knowledge that they just didn't stop experimenting until they discovered what they're passionate about. Then they went all in on that. And with time, those passions synergized together to allow them to do something so great that he called a life task, or they accomplished mastery, which is like the subject of the book. So from that point on, I was like, what am I doing here in this hole in the ground? Like, I'm drilling holes in this big hole in the ground for someone else's benefit, like to get gold. I'm risking my life. I'm risking my health, all for this. It was a great learning experience, and I learned a lot from it, but I just realized, like, I'm not accomplishing anything for myself here. I have no idea what I'm passionate about at all right now. Like, I've just been chasing the money and been a big follower. So I quit the mine like within a month later, and came back to London, Ontario. That's where I was born and raised. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do what I have to do to discover what my passions are. I'm going to push myself every day, experiment with something new every day or every week or every month until I discover what my passions are in life. And from there, 2012 to 2013, 14, it was just me just discovering my passions. And I came upon YouTube and watching all these fitness vloggers documenting their lives. And I was like, this is fascinating. But a lot of them are making these bold claims like, I did this exercise and now this is why I look like this, or I ate this certain food and now this is how this happened. And I was like, okay, this is great, but like, how can I follow that transition? How can I follow this journey? How can I see it in chronological order and see the changes that affected you? So I was like, man, I think I can do this YouTube thing, and I think I can do it in a different way, from a more scientific, experimental way, and show how I think we're all human experiments in this world, and document that process, document myself experimenting with something like stomach vacuums and doing it extensively on my body for a whole year straight and documenting those results. So I spent like 8 months just watching these other YouTubers, watching how they were interacting with their audiences, what they were documenting, how they were going about it, seeing the comments that they were leaving, like other people were leaving for them, and how they engage with them. And after 8 months, I was like, you know what? I'm doing this. I'm going to go all in on this. Like, I wouldn't be watching this for 8 months, studying it, if it's not something I'm passionate about. So I might as well start taking advantage of this passion thing. And from there, it's just been like a whirlwind of opportunities, ups and downs, highs and lows. And I believe about 2016, 2017, I stumbled into you, Matt, while I was vlogging myself out in public one day. At this time, I was already gaining a bunch of traction on YouTube and getting a bunch of subscribers and followers. And you were talking about wanting to go on your YouTube journey. And we had dinner together and just chatted for like an hour and a half. And I like saw the impact that you wanted to have on the world and how you wanted to, display your journey for others to learn from. And I realized like, wow, like this is something I'm passionate about as well too, is like helping others do the same thing that I was doing. And then again, since I met you, like it's been a whirlwind of like, we did some passion projects together, like the social lab and a few other things here and there. And then I started working with you and Jeff full time. And then we hosted like the Ontario Real Estate Conference, like OREC 2018. And then I moved in with you 2019 in Byron. And then since then, again, it's just been a whirlwind of building Problems or Profits, the whole team and the brand, and, helping you take Matt McKeever YouTube channel and really make it this solid, like, Canadian real estate channel, which we just rebranded over the last few months, and trying to take this and make it something big. So it's been an amazing, fascinating journey. So I hope that kind of answered your question there about what the last 5 to 10 years has been like. It's been crazy for sure.
Yeah, that's great, Peter, and definitely appreciate just the context before we jump into anything. And so I think, if we look back through even just the last 5 years or so, we've known each other for that timeline. And I think it's really easy for people to only kind of pick up, especially if they're looking just surface level, on the wins, right? And kind of overlook the graveyard of half-started projects that never launched, projects that launched and just never went anywhere. And I'd love to just hear kind of your take on it. And to me, the social lab is definitely one of those where, if I wanted to be mean to us, I would attack it and say it was a terrible waste of time, energy, and resources. And yet at the same time, I can't imagine anything that we're doing today occurring the way it is had it not been for that graveyard of other projects.
Yeah, for sure. So I know for myself, like what I decided to do with my YouTube channel from the start is like, I'm just going to experiment and document. I think a lot of people go on here and they're like, I'm going to create and do something. And the second they hit a few hurdles or they get a few negative comments, it like hits their ego because it's something they're creating and doing, versus like, I'm just going to share this shit. And I like, if this takes off, good. And then if something's going really well and I want to shift in a different direction and do something where people don't like or the views are lower, I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to do me for the next 3, 5, however many years I thought. And it's obviously not easy when you're getting a bunch of views and then they drastically go down, or, you take on a project like Social Lab, or we tried to do something that's outside of what we're currently doing, and it either fails or doesn't do as well. Like it's not easy, but I think it's good as well too. It's like having those problems and growing from them, whether they're a success or a failure, like helps you grow as a person. And I think so many people are holding back from even starting on something, or once they start something, they only get like partway into it and then they hit a roadblock or a wall, and then that pulls them back. It's like that's where you grow. That's where you like bloom into the flower you're meant to be, is when you hit those roadblocks and those barriers or those failures, and you pivot and you do something different, or you grow from it, or you're just like, hey, as I mentioned before, like that's something I'm not passionate about, but at least I experimented with it, and I didn't just dabble with it. Like I extensively went into it. I put my all and everything into it, and I learned, hey, that's not what I'm passionate about. That's not what I'm good at. But at least I now have that skill or that piece of knowledge that I can take forward. I think it's better to know you're not, like, it's kind of like the whole like gun mentality. It's better to have a gun and not need it rather than to need a gun and not have it. I'd rather have all this skills and knowledge that I've developed and not need it, rather than like need it and like have to spend years or weeks or months trying to develop it.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Peter. And you've certainly had a wealth of experiments in your own life, as well as experiments from the standpoint of your career in really building brands and social mediation. So I'd love to hear for you how you decide to go all in on something. Is it just an idea that you sparked? Do you have a process on actually identifying opportunities in your space or in your life that you actually want to experiment with? Like you mentioned the stomach vacuums. You obviously went all in on that for a period of time. With some of these different videos or projects that you've done in the past, whether they hit or didn't hit, how do you actually decide which pathway you want to go down at any given time?
Yeah, I think it's changed over the years. Like as we just are naturally as human beings, we're meant to grow and change and evolve. For me, it's like, especially in the beginning when I was like in my early 20s, it's like, well, what's capturing my attention right now? What's really getting me to dive in and learn something and be fascinated and interested with it. And back then it was very easy to be like, oh yeah, well, this is catching my attention. I should go in all in on this. Now it's, as I'm continuing to grow and evolve as a human being, it's like, I want to try this and see if this is going to work and see if this is going to go well before it's even like tickling my fancy. So it's like almost pushing myself to do it and to learn from it and grow from it. Like I believe around this time last year, we started social mediation. We kind of branched off from just being Matt McKeever's media team to let's see if I can start a business and do this thing. And, it's been a fascinating year and it's stressful as hell. And it's been a ride, that's for sure. But I'm still in this state, like, is this something I'm passionate about, enjoying, or am I just kind of like on this journey and pushing forward with this thing? And it's a ride, and it's fun to learn and to, again, grow new skills and new knowledge within it. But it's just, it seems to always be changing and ever growing. It's hard to know, what's your calling or what's pushing you to do something. But again, if something's like constantly grabbing my attention and I can't put it away, it's kind of like if you put something, like if you're looking at something on Amazon, don't buy it right away. Put it in your shopping cart. And if like a week later, you're still like, man, I think I need and want this thing. And then you leave it in there for another week. And then it's like, okay, I need to buy this thing or do this thing. And that's kind of like, at least how I feel about it.
Gotcha. And so I'd love to circle back and just explore mastery a bit more. And again, that idea of passion, and any tips or insights for people that do struggle with that. Because like you're certainly not alone in that constant desire or wondering, what is going to move the needle for me, or, is this passion more important than that passion? So I guess when you find yourself being pulled by a couple options.
Yeah. That's where it gets tough, of course. Again, this is like your life. This is your journey. This is the ride you're on. And you're like, do I go in this direction or this direction? Or do I try to do all three and slowly go at all three at the same time? I think that's very hard to know for sure. one of the best things that came in very early on in my YouTube journey, and this is a little tangential, but I think it's very on the subject, so I'm going to cover it here. This guy commented about what I do with intermittent fasting, and I've done a whole bunch of videos on intermittent fasting. And one of the big things that I'm a big proponent of is that it really optimizes and enhances your growth hormone. And I believe that helps with like it leads to testosterone, which leads to helping build muscle, keep your mind optimized, and all those things. And this guy commented saying, because like I'll fast from 20 to 22 hours a day, like probably 4 to 5 days a week. You know, some days I loosen and open up my eating window a bunch, but that's generally, 18 to 22 hours is where like I'm really good. And I find I'm the most productive. I can fuel and refuel myself well, and I can maintain and grow muscle on that. And he commented saying like, you're doing all this work with intermittent fasting just to go an inch every day. And I was like, yeah, I see what you're saying there, but I'd rather be gaining an inch every day in this area and to know that I'm progressing rather than standing still. Because at the end of the year, I did the calculations back then, and so I'll probably be wrong, but it's like I'm going to be 33 feet farther than I was at the beginning of the year, or 33 feet farther than you. And this is where I think it kind of works with what you were saying there, Matt, is that in the beginning, to get that inch every day, maybe not with intermittent fasting, but maybe developing another skill or another piece of knowledge, to go that mile, you have to like crawl to get that inch. And your knees are bleeding, your hands are bleeding as you're crawling through this mile. But then after like a week or 2 weeks of crawling every day to get that inch and it taking all that time, then you're walking through that mile and you're doing it in like half the time. Then a month later, you're kind of jogging through that mile, and it's so much easier to go get that inch now. Then after like 3-4 months, maybe a year, you can sprint through that mile in like 5 minutes, and then you just gained and garnered that inch. So the way I look at it now, because I've developed all these skills and all this knowledge and all these facets of life, that before noon, I'm like sprinting through all these areas of my life, and I'm getting inch. And now I can go explore and do something else and do something different and something new that I'm going to have to crawl through in that area. And it's very similar to like the 10,000 hours it takes to develop a skill or knowledge. I've actually read some studies where it does in the beginning, but once you've developed skills and knowledge in all these areas of life, it doesn't take 10,000 hours to develop a new skill. So what I would say for others there is kind of look at yourself like you're an RPG character in a game. And you're like, well, does it make sense to go become, skilled at sword fighting first, or to develop like solid muscle mass and tone so that way it's easier to swing that sword? I don't know if that's the best narrative for our modern day and age, but if that kind of helps people get that idea that, look at yourself like this character where you're going to develop new skills and knowledge, and what's going to be the easiest things to develop first. For myself, it was like health, fitness, all that stuff. Because like that stuff's not going to change when you're 30, 40, 50, 60. It might change slightly, but having all that knowledge now, I don't even need to think about eating and food and all that stuff anymore because I've developed it. Now I can go do other stuff. So yeah. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, well, and I think there was something there that you kind of hit upon, but maybe didn't explore fully. And I haven't really thought about before necessarily, but being good at committing is in and of itself a bit of a skill set. And I think for a lot of people, just committing to something at the start, even if you're like, I don't know, I might be sick of this in 6 months, but like just committing to it and seeing it through until you decide whether it is the right or the wrong thing for you. That skill set, again, when you go and try and conquer the next dragon or slay it, you'll be able to draw upon that reservoir of experience and willpower and be able to apply the previous commitment you developed into the new endeavors. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, another comment that came in early on in my journey, because I was always discussing like develop skills and knowledge, experiment. Someone asked me like, what would you say is the best skill to develop, or what's the best piece of knowledge to develop? I'm like, it really sat with me for like a week, and I was like, I think the best skill to develop is the ability to develop more skills. So it's like, as you're saying there, like having that commitment and discipline, which only really comes by being rigorous and constantly rigorous with stuff, which is actually like a tattoo that I got on my hand from like you can see it in Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks throughout his 20s, and it's ostinato rigore. And what it means is like constant rigor, being constantly rigorous in everything that you do in life, a stubborn, relentless, persevering work ethic. If you can develop that at a young age and maintain and grow through that, and of course you're going to go through ups and downs through life, but if you can have a stubborn, relentless, persevering work ethic in what you're truly doing, like, holy shit, it doesn't matter what you're going to do, because like you're going to do amazing at that thing.
Yeah, 100%. I can definitely appreciate the context too, from a fitness perspective, because that's really seems to be where you started. That's where you had passions from the beginning, of just committing to a set challenge and doing it every single day relentlessly. And like, that's your line in the sand of, I'm going to do this challenge and I am going to gain that inch every single day. And that cumulative effect really adds up. It's the same really concept when somebody's trying to lose weight or make any sort of body transformation. Those additive habits really make a difference long term, because you become a different person as you do all of these things, and as those new elements of your life just become your daily routine. And certainly I mean I've seen this in clients coming from the fitness industry, but also in doing a lot of fitness challenges myself, and certainly have been inspired by a lot of the ones that you've done, Peter. And in the past year, I went from the 75 hard challenge to a handstand challenge to being vegetarian and doing dance to being a carnivore powerlifter. And now I'm in a phase where I'm following a bodybuilding program, and doing all of those challenge habitually. I'm back to drinking a gallon of water, which was the hardest thing ever in the 75 hard challenge, because I would leave it to the end of the day. Now I just drink it in the first like 4 hours of the day and it's done, versus before it was the biggest struggle. I was like 10 p.m. at night, still half the thing to go, doing a walk late at night, still getting it done because I committed to it, but it was super hard. But being good at committing to what you've set out and actually executing on it is actually something that most will fail. Most will quit early. Most will not fulfill the promises that they've kept to themselves. And I think that that's where that self-confidence actually stems from, is the ability to commit to something and know that you will execute on that thing because you are the person committing to that. And when you have that sort of energy out in the world, that sort of level of commitment and assurance comes through everything that you do, not just in your fitness, but now in this business that you've created, and now in the next venture. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's something that I think, Peter, you've really seemed to develop really effectively over the years, of finding something and just going all in on it, and the capacity to then reflect on that thing and take learning from it and carry that forward as cumulative knowledge into the next thing. And I think that that is really powerful and something that a lot of people can learn from, whether it be in business, whether it be in life, in family, or your fitness and well-being. So from that perspective, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's just getting started? Maybe it's 21-year-old you that is potentially, you could have made very different decisions and gone down a very different pathway in life. So what sort of advice would you give to those people who are maybe just getting started on their journey?
Yeah, it would probably be a lot of what I've been iterating so far throughout the podcast, is like, go all in on it. Don't just dabble with something. I've seen so many people who are like, oh, I'm interested in this thing and I think I want to do it. Like, again, with you and the stuff that you've been doing, like you're documenting, you're showing it, you're sharing it with people. Like that partly gets you committed to it as well too, because like you're putting it out there to the world. I don't think it's for everyone to put things out there to the world and say like, I'm going to do this, but committing openly to something as well too really has that extra onus to do it and to stick to it. But again, just going all in on it, and also understanding that like it's a marathon. I think so many people just expect that, like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's going to happen in a week or it's going to happen in a month. Like, just take it easy. You're not going to win every day. Like, some days you're going to be sore. Some days you're going to be tired. Some days you're going to be run down. But as long as you just, on those days, you go through the motions to complete it and to do it, and you stay committed to it, you don't give up on it on those days, like, you're going to push forward and you're going to grow from that. So again, just kind of going all in on something, finding, again, if you don't know what your passions are, like I was when I was 21 and escaped from the mine, is find something that's tickling your fancy, but extensively experiment around with it. Don't just dabble with it. And when you do find if you're passionate or not about it, also question too, like, is it this thing or is it an aspect of this thing that I'm passionate about? I've seen so many people who are like, oh yeah, like I love photography, or I love art, or I love like work, like doing like fitness and stuff. But is it that, or is it an aspect of it? Like, do you like, with the photography, like working with other people, or again, like documenting other people's lives and helping bring their story to fruition? I thought it was really documenting for me and YouTube and stuff, but it was more like, wow, I really like bringing people's story or their message to the world and having that be able to come out. So again, just kind of keeping all that in mind as you're going through it and understanding, like, this is a marathon, guys. Like, you don't play an RPG game and then you're like, oh man, I'm only at level 3. Like, this game sucks. It's like, you're going to keep leveling up, right? Like, you're going to keep growing. You're going to get the newest skin, or you're going to, like, be jacked by the end, or just do something crazy, right? Like, this is what it is. Like, it's a ride. It's your journey through life. So just don't give up on it. Go all in on it. And yeah.
Awesome. And I'd love to explore any tips on how to go all in, or how to get that level of commitment. Is it a matter of just like being like, I'm doing this, like, because I think a lot of people constantly are waiting for the perfect implementation before ever experimenting.
Yeah. So this is something that I did very early on with fitness, and I've documented this in like my first couple of years on YouTube, but I used to keep like a calendar opened up on my dresser. So back then I was tracking my weight extensively, tracking my macros, tracking all this stuff. So it's understanding that the human mind and body is like hackable. Like, you can hack it. And like, I still to this day have like to-do lists that are sitting around me that, like, you scratch it off and it actually gives you like a dopamine boost when you do that and you accomplish that thing. So if you guys go look back through like my 2015 and 2016 videos, you'll see I have this calendar that's sitting on my desk. And when I did an okay productivity day, I would circle the date with just a red circle. When I had a great productivity day, I would square it. When I had like an amazing productivity day and I did everything that I wanted to do, I'd give myself a star. And I've shown in YouTube videos me flipping through this book, and you can see, just because I started implementing this calendar, that I went from like, 1 month is a crap load of crap load of circles, some squares, and a few stars. But then as like you go on, it's like after 3 or 4 months, it's mainly stars with a few squares and maybe 1 or 2 circles. And that's just because, again, like, you're putting it down on paper, you're physically documenting it. If it's the calendar's not good for you, like, again, like a camera, or now you guys have the added benefit of like having your phone with you, and you can document stuff on Instagram stories and Facebook stories. And the benefit to that, you're putting it out there, but it also deletes after 24 hours. I'd spend all this time editing the videos and putting it on YouTube just to keep myself accountable. But again, kind of implementing these little measures to make sure you're staying on top of yourself. It's very easy to go through a day in the life of a human being and it just kind of fly by without, making sure you're actually hitting your goals and doing everything. So if you're a dummy like me, like legit, there's some things I can do on the computer, but for the most part, I need to like track everything down and have it written down where I'm like crossing everything to do today. And it's just crossing. This is the podcast. People won't be able to see, but I have like a clipboard where every day I write out like what I have to do today. And it's just little dashes of the things I need to do in my agenda for the day. But that's what I do.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Peter. I think a lot of people, as Matt said, just want it to be perfect, and they end up in this state of analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, the opposite of that. And you end up planning and planning, and then some sort of bump, or you run into some sort of thing in that planning process, and then it never actually happens. So to be able to take action on that and just start before you're ready, and have it be imperfect, and being comfortable with that imperfection, I think is also a very valuable skill that you've certainly taught me. And I think from that perspective, also documenting and actually putting it out there adds that layer of accountability, right? When you say in front of everyone who you have on social media that you're going to commit to something, and you post about it, and then you fall off the wagon, people will ask you about it. So putting yourself into those social constraints, I think, is really important. Is there any opportunity that you see right now in your current environment, or anything that you see maybe as something that maybe you don't have the time to take down right now, but for someone coming up, they would have the opportunity to crush it?
Yeah, this is tough because with the whole kind of problems or profits mindset, I do see a lot of problems that could utilize solving. It's just a matter of like, do I have the time, effort, and energy to do it? I do think a lot of people right now are just not capitalizing on social media and these amazing tools to document and share your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, your life with, which I would heavily insist that you guys do, because who knows, in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, like these social media platforms might not be free for you to post on. You're just going throughout like, oh, this will always be available. But like, again, I managed to gain so much attention and opportunity because of these. And I know, Matt, you as well too, and Rebecca, you as well. And it's all because like the shit is free right now, but that doesn't mean it's going to be free in the future. So capitalizing on these to share and grow an organic following that trust and believe in you is fucking huge. We've discussed this before, Matt, like the 1,000 true fans. You can have 1,000 people, and like I have no interest in trying to like capitalize on my following or my audience, but the mindset that like if you have 1,000 people paying you $10 a month or something, like that can be lucrative enough. I think so many people think like, oh, I need hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers, or they might look at other people and be like, oh, you're not successful because you don't have this massive following. But it's very easy to be like successful and have a life and a career, at least right now, by utilizing these social platforms and having 1,000 true fans with it. Now, beyond that, I think there's so many opportunities right now that's just going on, like in the NFT space and with crypto, which I wish I could be more on top of right now. I think right now as well too, like social media, like what we're doing with social mediation, I think there's lots of opportunities to build a big solid brand where you have that 1,000 true followers and fans. And if it's not something that you have the time, effort, and energy to do yourself, like having other people help do that for you and with you. And then again, I'd have to look through all my sheets of paper and the notes I've taken, but there's tons of ideas that I wish I could double down on and capitalize on right now, but I just unfortunately don't have the time. I keep those for myself though.
And so speaking of trying to save people time, Peter, I'd love to hear what's maybe your highlight reel or the best life hacks, the best experiments you've done so far that you'd encourage other people to explore doing or integrating into their day-to-day habits.
Yeah, I haven't really thought of it from that mindset, I guess, for a while, because I just kind of am going through it. Again, I think when you're younger, like if you're listening to this in your early 20s, it's just like experiment and develop skills and knowledge so you can learn faster and you can develop skills faster. This year, I'm reading, my goal is to read 100 books before the end of the year. I am utilizing Audible for a bunch of that, but a bunch of people message me being like, how the heck are you doing this? Like, how are you able to retain and hold on to this information? And it's like, well, like for the last 10 years, I've been developing this skill of reading. And now it's easier for me to do, and I can retain and hold this information. And because every year I've been trying to improve myself. But in regards to just day-to-day kind of habits and hacks, like I think intermittent fasting is huge. Like I don't have to worry about food or even think about food until I'm ready for it. And then I cook a bunch of food up and I and I spend that time doing that. So it's like for a solid 18 hours, I just can focus on being productive or being with someone I care about and spending all that time there. Or if it's relaxing day and it's tuning out, it's like putting all my effort and energy into that. So I think intermittent fasting is one of the best hacks I've seen and done for myself that, I started back in 2010. So I've been doing it for 11 to 12 years now. And it's one of the best things that I've ever done. Besides that, again, just really documenting all your goals and your ambitions and dreams, writing them down physically every day. Keeping, if you do have we have a Google Calendar, which I didn't start using for like the last year or so, but ever since then, I've seen huge change in regards to my productivity because it's always just there. It's in there. I can just check that quick. And then, yeah, I'm not too sure other ones off the top of my head. That's been like an everyday thing. I know this last year, I put all my effort and energy in trying to grow social mediation and reading these 100 books. So in many aspects, I'm sacrificing like aspects of my health and mental growth and like my physical activity to accomplish these goals. So right now, like the last year, my mind's been all in like, these are your 2 goals, Peter. Like, put blinders on and don't focus on anything else. So maybe that's something as well too, is like understanding what you're doing and why, and understanding your why truly deep and knowing that like, hey, just shut everything else the hell out and focus on those things.
Definitely appreciate that. Well, Peter, if people want to reach out to you or follow along on your journey, what is the best place for them to reach you?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media platforms as the Hungarian Experiment. The usernames might be a little different here and there depending on the platform, but you can typically find me anywhere at the Hungarian Experiment. Feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. Go check out my YouTube channel. I have 6 years of my life documented on there, along with a lot of like informative content that's there to help you guys, like explains intermittent fasting, explains stomach vacuum, growth hormone optimization. I've dabbled with psychedelics a bunch. That's not on YouTube, so you'd have to go to my website if you want to check those out, but extensively experimented around with magical mushrooms and just a whole bunch of stuff that's all up on my YouTube channel there that I believe is just there to help you guys out. So if you guys are interested, go check out my YouTube channel and send me a DM on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter.
Awesome. Another fantastic episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. Make sure you guys check out Peter, aka the Hungarian Experiment. He produces a lot of fantastic content, as well as subscribe to the podcast, which Peter is also the producer of. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. And Peter, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.